Hello, good day, everybody, and welcome to our general mathematics class. Today, we're going to talk about bonds. If you remember, last week we have talked about stocks, and today we'll talk about something that is similar to it. We call it the bonds. Let's start by reciting today's memory verse, and it's found in Romans 13, verse 8. It says, "Let no debts remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another." Your VCA boosters is on the business lesson number 4. You need to reflect on today's memory verse and write your own version for a Christian business lesson. At the end of today's class, you'll be able to illustrate bonds, distinguish between stocks and bonds, describe the different markets for bonds, and analyze different market indices for bonds. And here's our venture activity. It's an excerpt of the article, "Should I Invest in Bonds?" With all the attention the stock market gets lately, you would think it is getting the bulk of investments being made in the Philippines, right? Not really. The bulk of the investments are usually placed in credit instruments like bonds. So what are bonds? Bonds are contracts in which an investor lends money to a borrower. As compensation to the lender, the borrower agrees to pay interest, often twice a year and generally at a fixed amount. The borrower also agrees to repay a stated sum at the end of a fixed period. The date that the loan is to be repaid is called the maturity date. Bonds issued by a sovereign state are known as government securities. It is usually considered a zero or minimal risk because the government backs the indebtedness. They only need to print more money to pay you. In the Philippine investment scenario, the majority of fixed income investments are placed in government securities. However, top corporations issued some investment grade bonds, including PLDT, Ayala Corporation, San Miguel Corporation, and SM. The risk associated with corporate bonds are higher than those issued by the government. Hence, one can expect higher corporate bonds yields. Bonds of high quality companies are considered safer than most investment alternatives for the following reasons. First, the annual income to be received is generally fixed in advance. Second, the contracted loan principal is likely to be repaid in full at a stated due. In the event of financial difficulties, the borrower still has to comply with the terms of the contract. Interest and principal will be repaid on time, or the company will be facing bankruptcy. And here's our brainstorming question. Why do you think the bond market has not gained much attention in the Philippines compared to the stock market? And why do you think the government is the most secure issuer of bonds? Why are government bonds almost considered risk-free? You need to answer that as we go along with our discussion. Let's first define the term. What is a bond? A bond is a promissory note. It's a long-term promissory note issued that that lender, the one who borrows your money, will pay that amount of money on a maturity date and with regular interest payments called coupons. A bond is similar to a loan. So when a corporation is selling a bond, it sells you a promise that they will pay back. They will pay back the money that they owe you plus the interest at a particular time. So bond is basically pautang, not an investment like stocks. A bondholder is someone who holds a bond. So whether you are lending a corporation or the government a bond, then you're automatically called bondholder. And if a stockholder receives a stock certificate, A bondholder also receives a bond certificate. A bond certificate is a document that you receive to guarantee that your agreement with the one that owes you the money and or a representative of a company that we call a trustee. Now, what is a trustee? A trustee is appointed by the corporation to represent the bondholders as a group in their transaction with the corporation. Then, a coupon is a periodic interest payment that the bondholder receives during the time between the purchase date and the maturity date, and usually receives semi-annually. And the interest rate is called coupon rate. More terms. Par value. If you see par value, it's the same as the bond's face value. It's the price that the investor pays for the bond at the time it was purchased. The market value is the price at which the bond is being sold. So for example, if you got the bond at 100 pesos and its selling price is also at 100 pesos, then we say that it's purchased at par. But if you got the bond at 150 pesos and then it's only selling at 100 pesos, so you are purchasing a bond at a discount. Next, if you got the bond at 150 pesos and then the selling price of the bond this time is 200 pesos, higher than the price when you got it, then the bond is purchased at a premium. Now, the number of years from the time of purchase to the maturity date is called term of a bond. And another, someone who buys or who sells your bond in your behalf, we call it a broker. And the payment or the charges that you're giving to a broker is called a broker's commission or brokerage fee. Excuse me for a while. Now let's get back. Let us compare stocks and bonds. If you say stocks, you are equity financing. It means you are raising money to allow investors to be a part of your company. So for example, I want to raise money and it's no longer utang, but the one who will help me in raising the money will be a co-owner of my company. Then you are selling stocks. But in bonds, it's a form of debt financing. I want to raise money. So what will I do? I will borrow from investors. Therefore, I'm just selling bonds. But if you want them to be a co-owner of your company, then you sell stocks. The next one, stock prices vary every day. These prices are reported in various media like newspapers, TV, and internet. While in bonds, investors are guaranteed interest payments. There is a fixed interest rate, like 8%. And when will the money be returned? For stocks, you don't know. You don't have a fixed amount. You don't have a fixed rate on how much will you get. It depends on the stock market and on your stock investment. Next, in stocks, investors can earn if the stock price increase. And if they lose the money if the stock price will also decrease or if the company goes bankrupt. While for bonds, investors need to consider the borrower's credit rating. So whether the company is doing well or not, you will still get your money back. But in stocks, if the company will really have a very successful stock price, then you'll also succeed with them. But if it goes bankrupt, you also go bankrupt with them. While for bonds, if what's this? If the company will be very successful, you'll just get that amount stated for you. If the company will go bankrupt, don't worry, you still get the same amount that was stated in your bond certificate. In stocks, there's a higher risk, but there's also a possibility of higher returns, especially if the company is doing very well. For bonds, it's lower risk, but lower yield as well. Lastly, for stocks, it can be appropriate if the investment is for a long term, 10 years or more. It will allow investors to wait for stock prices to increase if ever they go low. While for bonds, it can be appropriated for retirees because of the guaranteed fixed income, or for those who need the money soon because they can afford to take a chance at the stock markets. So, if you are an investor, what will you prefer? Will you be a stockholder or will you be a bond holder? Now, I mentioned earlier that a bond holder receives a bond certificate. And here's what you see in the bond certificate. The first one on the left is a certificate number. Here's the corporation issuing the certificate, Eastern Air Airlines Incorporated, given to A.C. Edwards, the name of the bondholder, and 100. The 100 here is the par value of the bond. The maturity date is in 2005, and you'll see the coupon rate. It's at 11.75%. The seal of the corporation and the signatories. So these are the basic parts of a bond certificate. Now let's have some problems. Let's go to problem number 1. Miss Johanna Vistan bought 50. It means 50 bonds. Bought 50 bonds that cost 1,000 each at JJJ bonds at 105. If there's only this 105, it means 105% of the par value. What is her total investment in JJJ bonds? Now, let's start first with the market price, the market value of the bond. How much will each bond cost? Remember, that's 1,000 pesos, but it's now at 105. So, premium times 1.05. We multiply that, it's going to be 1,050. That's the market price for each bond. Now, how many bonds were being purchased? There were 50, right? So let us multiply. That's going to be total investment is at 1,050 times 50 bonds. We multiply that. The answer is 52,500. This is the total investment made by Miss Johanna Vistan for the JJJ bonds. If you have questions, you can pause this video and make a review. But if you don't have, you can continue to problem number 2. John Alfonso bought 5 1,000 Mackey Outback Corporation bonds at 92. It means 92% at a discount, plus 10 pesos commission per bond through a broker. What is John's total amount of investment? 5 bonds were bought at 1,000 pesos at 92% plus 10 pesos. I'm sorry for that. 10 pesos commission per bond. So let's first have the market price of the bond. It's going to be 1,000 pesos times 92%, 92.92. So it's at 920 pesos. Let's solve for the total investment. That's going to be price per bond times how many bonds? There are 5. Then you add the commission per bond to a broker. So we now have 10 pesos per bond, and we have 5 bonds. So we multiply, we'll get 4,600 plus 50 pesos. So the total investment will be 4,650 pesos. If you have questions, you can pause this for a moment, but if you don't have, you can go to the next problem. Problem number 3. Mr. Santos owns 45 bonds with a par value of 1,000 each and pays 8.5% interest. What annual income does Mr. Santos get from these bonds? Now, our formula for annual income is annual income equals par value times rate times time times number of bonds. Now, the par value of each bond is at 1,000 pesos. You multiply it by the rate, 0.085, that's 8.5% interest. Time is only 1, it's not indicated. And Mr. Santos has 45 bonds. So you need to multiply these numbers to solve for the annual income. Multiplying them, you will get 3,825. This is the annual income of Mr. Santos. So you see, Mr. Santos will earn an extra of 3,825 per year. So the more that Mr. Santos will invest on this, the more he'll receive this every year. Let's go to the next one. Problem number 4. Determine the amount of semi-annual coupon paid for a 3% bond with a face value of 100,000, which matures 8 years. How many coupons are paid? Now, let's first answer the first question. We are looking for the amount, the coupon amount. Remember, the coupon amount is the interest being paid for the bond. So how do we find that? That's going to be par value times rate times time. So we have 100,000 for the par value, multiply it by the rate, that's 3%, 0.03, times the time, 8 years. So multiplying the 3 of them, we will get, sorry. The coupons are paid semi-annually, right? So we just multiply it by 1/2. It's half a year. So you multiply 100,000 times 0.03 times 1/2. It means you'll get 1,500 pesos semi-annually. Now, the next question. How many coupons are paid? Remember that the bond will be paid after 8 years and it will be paid semi-annually. So 8 years times twice in a year. So you will pay 16 coupons. It means that the person will pay 16 times of the 1,500 pesos. Any questions? Feel free to message me in Telegram if you have any. If you don't have any, then this ends our discussion on bonds. Have a great day, everybody.